The mafia boss saw the fear in her eyes, then swore to make every man who hurt her pay. The bass line at Neon Harbor did not just vibrate through the floor. It settled deep in the bones, a relentless, thumping reminder that the night was far from over, for the patrons dancing under the strobing purple and blue lights. The rhythm was an escape. For Maya Collins, it was simply the soundtrack to the second half of a 16-hour workday. Maya adjusted the heavy tray balanced on her left shoulder, wincing as the strap of her apron dug into the junction of her neck and shoulder. She had spent 8 hours standing over a whirring, overheating copier at a print shop in the crumbling industrial district of Havenport, inhaling toner dust and dealing with impatient customers who wanted their flyers yesterday. Now, she was 6 hours into her shift at the club, her feet throbbing in cheap black non-slip shoes that had lost their cushioning 3 months ago. She moved through the crowd with the practiced invisibility of someone who had learned that being seen was dangerous. Her gaze remained fixed on the path ahead, scanning for empty glasses and waving hands, but never making direct eye contact for longer than a second. Eye contact was an invitation, and Maya had stopped accepting invitations a long time ago. Every dollar she earned tonight was already spent. The mental calculation ran on a loop in her head. Rent for her studio apartment was due in 4 days. The electric bill was past due, glowing red on her online banking app. And then there was Dr. Aris, the therapist who let her pay on a sliding scale but still cost $80 a session. Maya needed those sessions. Without them, the nightmares that stalked her sleep would bleed into her waking hours. And she could not afford to fall apart. Not when she was finally free, or at least technically free. She dropped a round of vodka tonics at a booth near the dance floor, forcing a polite, tight-lipped smile as a $20 bill was shoved onto her tray. As she turned back toward the bar, she noticed a shift in the atmosphere. It was subtle, like the air pressure dropping before a thunderstorm. The bartenders, usually loud and joking as they mixed drinks, had gone quiet, their movements efficient and sharp. The bouncers near the VIP entrance stood straighter, hands clasped in front of them rather than crossed over their chests. Maya reached the bar station and set her tray down. Becca, the head bartender who had blue streaks in her hair and a cynical view of everyone, leaned over the counter. "Table 4 is occupied," Becca murmured, keeping her voice low enough to be lost under the music. The owner called down, "He wants the best service. No mistakes." Maya frowned. Table 4 was the prime spot, the secluded semicircular booth raised on a platform that offered a view of the entire club while remaining shadowed and private. It was rarely booked. "Who is it?" Maya asked, wiping down her tray. "Moretti," Becca said, the name sliding out of her mouth like a curse or a prayer. Maya felt a chill that had nothing to do with the club's aggressive air conditioning. Everyone in Havenport knew the name, Dante Moretti. He was not just a criminal, he was an institution. The stories about him were contradictory and terrifying. They said he controlled the docks, the construction unions, and the high-end gambling rings. They said he was ruthless to his enemies, a man who dismantled rival organizations with the precision of a surgeon cutting out a tumor. But there were other whispers, too, that he kept the streets clean of the worst kind of filth, that he had a code of honor that was practically medieval in its strictness. "He is here?" Maya asked, her voice small. "Just walked in," Becca said, though, nodding toward the VIP section. "Take this bottle over. It is the 25-year-old Scotch. Do not spill it, or we are both dead." Becca was exaggerating. Probably, but Maya's hands trembled slightly as she took the heavy crystal bottle in 4 glasses. She took a deep breath, steeling herself. It was just a table. He was just a man. She had dealt with dangerous men before, and she had survived. She just had to be invisible. She navigated the stairs to the VIP platform, keeping her head bowed. The air up here smelled different. Expensive cologne, leather and smoke. Distinct from the sweat and cheap perfume of the dance floor, 3 men sat around the dark table, but only one mattered. Maya could feel his presence before she even looked up. He sat in the center, leaning back against the leather banquette with a deceptive casualness. He wore a charcoal suit that fit him so perfectly it looked like a second skin, the top button of his shirt undone. Maya approached the table, placing the glasses down on the polished black surface. She moved with mechanical precision, terrified that her shaking hands would betray her. "Good evening, gentlemen," she said, her voice barely a whisper. Two of the men were large, broad-shouldered enforcers who scanned the room with bored paranoia. But the man in the center, Dante Moretti, was looking at her. He did not look at her the way men usually did in this club. There was no leering, no hungry sweep of the eyes over her body. His gaze was dark, intelligent, and uncomfortably sharp. It felt like he was reading the small print of a contract written on her skin. As she poured the amber liquid into his glass, her sleeve rode up slightly, revealing the faint, yellowing bruises that encircled her wrist. They were old marks, fading ghosts from a panic attack 2 weeks ago when she had gripped her own arm too hard to stop the shaking. But under the VIP lights, they looked stark. Dante's eyes dropped to her wrist. His gaze lingered there for a fraction of a second too long. Maya instinctively tugged her sleeve down, her heart hammering against her ribs. "Thank you," Dante said. His voice was a deep baritone, smooth and cultured, lacking the rough edge she expected from a mob boss. "You are welcome, sir," Maya breathed. Just as she turned to leave, a roar of laughter erupted from a booth directly below the platform. It was a harsh, aggressive sound, the sound of men who believed they owned the space they occupied. Maya flinched. It was a violent, involuntary jerk of her shoulders, her body bracing for a blow that was not coming. She froze, her eyes squeezing shut for a brief moment as she fought to regulate her breathing. When she opened her eyes, Dante Moretti was watching her. He was not looking at her wrist anymore. He was looking at her face. His expression was unreadable, but his stillness was absolute. He had seen the flinch. He had seen the terror that lay just beneath her surface, the way she held herself like a cornered animal waiting for the trap to snap. Maya hurried away, her cheeks burning. She needed to get back to the bar. She needed to hide. She spent the next hour working the far side of the room, trying to shake the feeling of Dante's eyes on her back. The club was reaching peak capacity, the noise level rising to a deafening roar. Maya was clearing a table near the service entrance when the front doors swung open, admitting a new group of men. Her blood ran cold. The tray in her hands rattled against the empty glasses. Striding through the crowd was Rylan Kane. He looked exactly the same as the last time she had seen him, the night she had packed a bag in 3 minutes and climbed out a bathroom window. He wore a silk shirt unbuttoned too far, showcasing a gold chain, and his hair was gelled back in a style that was meant to look slick but just looked greasy. He moved with a swagger that made Maya's stomach turn. Rylan was a manager, a recruiter, a handler. He worked for the agency, the nebulous modeling firm that promised young women travel and fame, only to lock them in houses, strip them of their passports, and force them into contracts that included things never written on paper. Maya had been one of the lucky ones. She had gotten out before the debts became impossible to repay, but Rylan had never forgotten the commission he lost when she vanished. He was not alone. He had 3 men with him, loud and laughing, pushing people out of their way. Maya spun around, her heart beating so fast it felt like a bird trapped in her chest. She could not let him see her. If Rylan saw her, the nightmare would start all over again. He would demand money she did not have. He would threaten to call the police and say she stole from the company. He would find out where she lived. She ducked her head, rushing toward the darkened hallway that led to the storeroom and the staff exit. If she could just hide in the back for 10 minutes. Maybe he would move to the VIP area or the dance floor. She pushed through the heavy velvet curtains into the corridor, gasping for air. The hallway was dimmer, the music muffled. She leaned against the wall, eyes closed, trying to force her lungs to expand. "Well, look at what we have here." The voice was like oil slicked over gravel. Maya's eyes snapped open. Rylan stood at the entrance to the hallway. He had seen her. Of course he had seen her. He had the instincts of a predator. "Maya Collins," Rylan said, stepping into the corridor. The 3 men with him stayed by the curtain, blocking the exit, grinning like jackals. "I thought you left town. Ran off to the big city to be a star." "I am working," Rylan, Maya said, her voice shaking. She hated how weak she sounded. "Please, I just want to do my job." Rylan chuckled, walking closer. The space in the hallway seemed to shrink. He smelled of expensive musk and stale cigarettes, a scent that triggered a wave of nausea in Maya's gut. "You owe us." "Maya," Rylan said, his voice dropping to a mock whisper. "You breached your contract. Do you know how much money I lost on you? The portfolio fees, the training, the client introductions. You ran out on a tab of $5,000. "I paid you," Maya argued, backing up until her shoulder blades hit the rough plaster of the wall. "I gave you everything I made for 6 months. I do not owe you anything." Rylan stopped inches from her. He was not a tall man, but in this narrow space. He loomed over her. He reached out, his hand snapping forward to grip her chin. His fingers dug into her jaw, forcing her to look at him. "You owe what I say you owe," Rylan hissed, his facade of charm dropping to reveal the cruelty beneath. "And if you do not have the cash, we can work out a payment plan. Just like old times. There are plenty of private parties looking for entertainment." Maya froze. Her body went rigid, a statue carved from fear. The memory of locked doors and blinding camera lights flashed through her mind. She could not breathe. Her hands, still clutching the serving tray, were trembling so violently the metal rattled against her hip. "Let go of me," she whispered, the words barely audible. Rylan smirked, leaning in closer. "Or what? You gonna scream? No one can hear you over the music. Sweetheart, you belong to the agency until I say you are done." Suddenly, the heavy velvet curtain at the end of the hall swept aside. It was not a frantic motion, it was calm, deliberate, and commanding. A figure stepped into the hallway, blocking the light from the club. Dante Moretti had a phone pressed to his ear, his other hand tucked into his pocket. He looked like a man taking a casual stroll, utterly unbothered by the chaos of the club. He stopped, his eyes landing on the scene in front of him. He saw Rylan's hand gripping Maya's face. He saw Maya pressed against the wall, her eyes wide and glassy with absolute panic. The color drained from her skin. He saw the way her fingers were white-knuckled around the tray, using it as a pathetic shield. Dante lowered the phone from his ear. He did not hang up. He just lowered it. The expression on his face did not change, but the temperature in the hallway seemed to drop 20 degrees. His eyes, usually dark and unreadable, turned into shards of ice. There was a lethal quality to his stillness. It was the pause before a gunshot. "Is there a problem here?" Dante asked. His voice was quiet. He did not shout. He did not posture. He spoke with the absolute authority of a man who had never had to repeat himself in his life. Rylan jumped, releasing Maya's chin as if he had been burned. He spun around, annoyance flashing across his face, ready to tell whoever it was to get lost. But when he saw Dante, the annoyance vanished, replaced by a flicker of genuine recognition and fear. "Mr. Moretti," Rylan stammered, taking a step back. "I did not realize you were back here." "I am making a call," Dante said, his voice smooth and dangerous. "And I prefer to do it without listening to a woman being threatened." Rylan forced a laugh, holding his hands up in a placating gesture. "It is nothing like that, Mr. Moretti. Just catching up with an old employee, a friendly dispute over some unpaid debts." Dante's gaze shifted to Maya. He looked at the red marks beginning to bloom on her jaw where Rylan's fingers had been. He looked at the way she was shaking, her chest heaving as she tried to pull air into her lungs. "She does not look like she is having a friendly conversation," Dante said. He walked forward. Rylan's friends at the end of the hall shifted uneasily, but they did not move to stop him. Nobody stopped Dante Moretti. Dante moved past Rylan and stepped directly in front of Maya. He did not touch her. He simply placed himself between her and Rylan, his broad back forming a solid, impenetrable wall. He shielded her completely from Rylan's view. Maya stared at the dark wool of his suit jacket. She could smell him now, sandalwood and clean linen. He radiated a heat that felt grounding. a sharp contrast to the cold terror running through her veins. For the first time in minutes, she felt like she wasn't drowning. "She works for me." Dante lied. It was a half-truth. She worked in a club that paid protection money to his organization. But in this moment, he claimed her completely. "And I do not allow my staff to be harassed." Ryland's face tightened. He was arrogant, but he was not stupid. Picking a fight with Dante Moretti was a death sentence in Havenport. "Look, no disrespect intended," Ryland said, his voice tight. "But this girl implies a contract she walked out on. It is a business matter." "It is a health code violation to have trash in the hallway," Dante countered, his tone bored. "Leave. Now." Ryland hesitated. His ego was bruising, and he hated walking away from a target. He leaned to the side, trying to catch a glimpse of Maya behind Dante's shoulder. "This is not over." "Maya," Ryland called out, his voice dropping to a sullen threat. "Interest accrues every day. Remember that." Dante took one step forward. It was a small movement, but it was so full of menace that Ryland flinched back. "If you say another word to her," Dante said, his voice dropping to a whisper that carried more weight than a scream, "I will have your tongue cut out and mailed to your mother." The silence that followed was heavy and suffocating. Ryland swallowed hard. He glared at Dante, then spun on his heel. "Let us go," Ryland muttered to his goons. They retreated, slipping back through the curtain and into the noise of the club. Dante did not move until they were gone. He waited until the curtain settled, ensuring they were truly out of sight. Then he turned slowly to face Maya. The lethal coldness vanished from his eyes, replaced by a guarded concern. He looked her over, checking for injuries without touching her. "Are you injured?" he asked. Maya shook her head, but the motion made the world spin. She was hyperventilating, short, shallow gasps that made her chest ache. She pressed her back against the wall, sliding down slightly as her knees gave way. "I am fine," she wheezed. "I am fine. I am sorry." Dante frowned. He crouched down, balancing effortlessly on the balls of his feet so that he was at eye level with her. He did not crowd her. He kept a respectful distance, his hands resting on his own knees. "Breathe," he instructed. His voice was calm, steadying, in through your nose, out through your mouth. "Match my breathing." Maya focused on him. She focused on the steady rise and fall of his chest. It took a minute, but slowly, the room stopped spinning. Her heart rate slowed from a gallop to a trot. She looked at him, really looked at him, and realized how absurd this was. The most dangerous man in the city was coaching her through a panic attack in the back hallway of a nightclub. "Thank you," she whispered. "You did not have to do that." "I dislike bullies," Dante said simply. He stood up, offering her a hand. Maya hesitated. She looked at his large, manicured hand, a hand that controlled an empire, a hand that could probably crush bones as easily as it held a scotch glass. But when she looked up at his face, she saw only patience. She reached out and took his hand. His grip was firm and warm, pulling her up to her feet with an easy strength. He let go immediately once she was steady, mindful of her boundaries. He reached into the inner pocket of his suit jacket and pulled out a small, heavy cardstock rectangle. It was black with gold embossing, a phone number, no name. "You do not owe me anything," Dante said, anticipating her protest, "and you do not owe that piece of filth anything either. But men like him, they are like cockroaches. They tend to come back." He pressed the card into her hand. Her fingers closed around it automatically. "If those men ever come near you again," Dante said, his eyes locking onto hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. "You call me day or night. Do you understand?" Maya nodded, unable to find her voice. "Good," Dante said. He adjusted his cuffs, the mask of the untouchable boss sliding back into place. He turned and walked back toward the VIP area, disappearing through the curtain as if he had never been there. 2 hours later, Maya sat on the edge of her unmade bed in her tiny studio apartment. The room was cluttered with sketches, laundry, and piles of bills. The radiator hissed and clanked in the corner, fighting a losing battle against the autumn chill leaking through the drafty window. She had double-locked the door. She had checked the window latch 3 times. She had wedged a chair under the doorknob. a habit she had picked up 2 years ago and never been able to break. In her hand, she held the black card. The gold numbers caught the light from the street lamp outside. It felt heavy in her palm, heavier than a piece of paper had any right to be. Calling Dante Moretti was insane. It was inviting a shark into the boat to save you from a barracuda. Her instincts, honed by years of walking on eggshells, screamed at her to throw the card away. Getting involved with the mafia was not a survival strategy. It was a death wish. But then she remembered the hallway. She remembered the way Rylan had looked at her, like she was property, like she was a loose end to be tied up. And she remembered the way Dante had looked at her. He had seen the bruises. He had seen the flinch. He had seen the terror that she spent every waking moment trying to hide. And he hadn't used it against her. He hadn't mocked her. He hadn't told her to toughen up. He had stood in front of her, a solid barrier between her and the world. For a brief, impossible moment, she had felt safe. Maya traced the edge of the card with her thumb. Rylan was not going to stop. She knew that in her bones. He needed the money, and he needed to prove he still controlled her. She was alone in a city that didn't care, fighting a war she was destined to lose unless she had an ally. She placed the card on her nightstand, right next to her alarm clock. She didn't dial the number, not yet, but she didn't throw it away, either. For the first time in a long time. Maya laid her head on the pillow and closed her eyes, imagining that the shadows in the corner of the room were not monsters waiting to strike, but guardians watching over her sleep. The silence of the residential street was usually a comfort to Maya, a stark contrast to the pounding bass of the club or the mechanical whine of the print shop. For 3 days, she had walked this route with her keys woven between her knuckles, her breath held tight in her chest, waiting for a shadow to move or a voice to call out. But nothing had happened. The city had remained indifferent, and Rylan Kane had remained absent. She had almost let herself believe she had slipped through the cracks. The autumn wind kicked up a swirl of dry leaves along the sidewalk, the scratching sound masking the low hum of an engine behind her. Maya adjusted her tote bag on her shoulder, her mind drifting to the frozen dinner waiting in her freezer. She was exhausted. Her bones felt heavy, weighed down by the double shifts she had pulled to make up for the hours she spent looking over her shoulder. Then, the hairs on the back of her neck stood up. It was a primal instinct, older than civilization, a warning signal that the predator was close. She stopped walking. The hum of the engine stopped with her. Maya did not turn around immediately. She stared at the cracked pavement under her worn sneakers, her heart beginning a frantic rhythm against her ribs. She took a step. The car tires crunched slowly over the asphalt, matching her pace. She turned her head, just enough to see out of the corner of her eye. It was a black sedan, sleek and expensive, with tinted windows that swallowed the streetlights. It was creeping along the curb, keeping perfect pace with her. Panic, cold and sharp, flooded her veins. Maya tightened her grip on her bag and sped up, her walk turning into a brisk jog. The car accelerated, the engine growling low and menacing. She was 3 blocks from her apartment. If she could cut through the alley between the bakery and the laundromat, she could lose them in the narrow maze of back streets where a car could not follow. She lunged toward the gap between the buildings, but the car surged forward, jumping the curb to block her path. The tires screeched as the vehicle slammed to a halt, cutting off her escape route. The doors flew open before the car had even fully stopped. Maya spun around to run the other way, but 2 men were already there, moving with the coordinated efficiency of pack hunters. They were large, wearing thick jackets that bulked out their frames, and behind them, stepping out of the driver's seat with a languid, terrifying casualness, was Rylan Kane. He looked impeccable, his suit crisp, his smile devoid of any warmth. "Going for a run, Maya?" Rylan asked, his voice echoing in the quiet street. "You look like you're in a hurry." Maya backed up until her heels hit the brick wall of the bakery. She was trapped. The street was empty. The windows of the houses nearby were dark, the occupants likely settled in front of televisions, oblivious to the nightmare unfolding just outside. "Leave me alone," Maya said, her voice trembling but loud. "I told you, I do not have anything for you." Rylan clicked his tongue, shaking his head as he walked toward her. He stopped just outside of striking distance, letting the fear marinate. "See, that is where you are wrong, sweetheart," Rylan said. "You have plenty. You have your time. You have your obedience. Do you have any idea how much I invested in your career? The grooming, the introductions? You were an investment, Maya. And investments need to pay dividends. I am not an investment," Maya spat, fear giving way to a spark of desperate anger. "I am a person, and I am done." Rylan laughed, a short, sharp sound. He lunged forward faster than she expected. His hand shot out, grabbing her upper arm. His fingers dug into the soft flesh, finding the exact spot where the old bruises were fading and creating new ones instantly. "You are done when I say you are done," Rylan hissed, his face inches from hers. "You belong to the agency. Now get in the car." He yanked her toward the open door of the sedan. Maya dug her heels into the pavement, her sneakers skidding. She twisted her body, using her free arm to claw at his hand, her nails digging into his skin. "No!" she screamed. Rylan swore and backhanded her, a stinging blow that made her ears ring. One of the other men moved in to grab her other arm. In a moment of pure desperation, Maya realized she could not win a physical fight. She went limp for a split second. Surprising Rylan, then dropped her heavy tote bag. As he stumbled, she wrenched her arm free and bolted. She did not run toward the sidewalk. She ran straight into the street. "Get her!" Rylan shouted. Maya sprinted, her lungs burning, blindly crossing the double yellow lines. Bright headlights blinded her from the right. A horn blared, a long, deafening sound that tore through the night. She tried to stop, but her momentum carried her forward. The bumper of a passing station wagon clipped her hip. It was not a direct hit, but the force was enough to lift her off her feet and send her spinning onto the hard asphalt. The world dissolved into a blur of pain and grit. Her knees and palms shredded against the road, her head slammed against the ground, seeing stars. She lay there for a second, stunned, gasping for air. The station wagon screeched to a halt 50 feet away, the driver shouting something, but Maya could not hear him. All she could hear was Rylan's footsteps pounding toward her. Her phone. It had flown out of her pocket when she fell. It lay on the pavement a few feet away, the screen cracked but glowing. By some miracle, it had landed face up. The last contact she had viewed was still open, Dante Moretti. Her vision swam, her right arm felt numb. She dragged herself across the asphalt, her fingers scrambling for the device. She could hear Rylan shouting at the driver of the station wagon, telling him to keep moving if he knew what was good for him. Maya's trembling finger hovered over the call button. She pressed it. Dante Moretti sat at the head of a long mahogany table in the private dining room of his flagship restaurant, the Gilded Olive. The room was soundproofed, the air thick with tension and the smell of roasted garlic. Across from him sat 3 men representing the union controlling the commercial docks, men who were currently trying to renegotiate a deal that had been set in stone for a decade. "We just feel that the percentage needs to reflect the current inflation," the union rep said, sweating slightly under Dante's unblinking stare. Dante took a sip of his water. He did not drink alcohol during negotiations. He preferred his mind sharp while others dulled theirs. "The agreement stands until the end of the fiscal year," Dante said, his voice level. "If you want to discuss inflation, we can discuss the shrinkage in the cargo containers that happens on your watch." The room went silent. The rep opened his mouth to argue, but the buzz of a phone against the mahogany surface cut him off. Dante frowned. Only 5 people had this number. His mother, his 2 top lieutenants, his lawyer, and... He looked at the screen. The name flared in white text against the black background. Maya Collins. Dante held up a hand, silencing the room instantly. He picked up the phone and brought it to his ear. "Maya?" he said. There was no greeting. All he heard was the sound of ragged, wet breathing and the terrifying scrape of something dragging against pavement. "Please," a voice whimpered. It was barely recognizable as hers. Then, a muffled shout in the background. "Grab her legs! Get her in the back seat before the cops show up!" It was Rylan Kane's voice. Dante stood up. The heavy wooden chair scraped loudly against the floor. toppling over with a crash. The union reps jumped, eyes wide. "Trace it," Dante snapped. Not to the phone, but to the man standing in the corner of the room, Marco, his head of security and technology. Marco did not ask questions. He pulled out a tablet instantly, his fingers flying across the screen. Dante kept the phone to his ear. His jaw clenched so hard a muscle feathered in his cheek. He could hear a struggle. A scream that was cut short. The sound of a car door slamming. "I have it," Marco said, his voice tight. "4th and Elm." 2 miles out, Dante was already moving. He did not excuse himself to the union reps. He did not say goodbye. He walked out of the room with a stride that promised violence, his coat flapping behind him like a cape. "Get the car," Dante ordered, "and bring the boys." Maya was trapped in a nightmare. She had been dragged off the street and thrown into the back of Ryland's sedan. The smell of leather and stale cologne filled her nose, choking her. She was wedged between the 2 large men, her hip throbbing with a sickening pulse of pain where the car had clipped her. Ryland was in the front seat, twisting around to look at her. "You are so much trouble, Maya," Ryland said, wiping blood from a scratch on his cheek where she had clawed him. "You really thought you could just make a phone call. Who are you calling? The cops? By the time they get here, we will be gone." Maya did not answer. She curled in on herself, protecting her ribs. She had dropped the phone. It was still lying on the street, probably crushed under a tire by now. No one was coming. The car swerved into a dark alley behind an abandoned appliance store, shielded from the main road by a row of overflowing dumpsters. Ryland killed the engine. "Get her out," Ryland commanded. "We switch cars here. The van is waiting." The door opened and rough hands grabbed Maya's jacket. She was hauled out into the cold night air, her legs buckling under her. She collapsed onto the dirty concrete, scraping her palms again. "Get up," one of the men growled, grabbing a handful of her hair and yanking her head back. Maya cried out, tears leaking from her eyes. She was exhausted. Her body felt broken. She looked up at the sliver of moon visible between the buildings, wondering if this was how she was going to disappear. Ryland walked around the car, pacing. "Where is the dealer? He said he would have the van here 5 minutes ago." He pulled out his phone, dialing angrily. Maya saw her chance, however slim. She tried to crawl toward the gap between the dumpster and the wall. The man holding her hair jerked her back. "Going nowhere. Bitch." Suddenly, tires screeched at the mouth of the alley. High beams flooded the narrow space, blindingly bright white light that turned the shadows into stark relief. Ryland spun around, shielding his eyes. "Who is that?" The lights cut out. 2 doors opened. Maya squinted into the darkness. She saw silhouettes, 3 of them. The first figure moved with a terrifying speed. Ryland's hired muscle barely had time to reach for the knife in his belt before he was on the ground. A sickening crack echoed through the alley as an arm was twisted at an unnatural angle. The man holding Maya's hair let go, distracted by the sudden violence. He turned to fight, but a fist connected with his jaw with the force of a sledgehammer. He crumbled to the ground next to Maya, unconscious before he hit the concrete. Ryland stumbled back, fumbling for something in his jacket pocket. A gun, maybe, or a knife. He never got the chance to use it. Dante Moretti emerged from the shadows like a wraith. He did not look like a businessman anymore. He looked like war personified. He closed the distance between them in 2 long strides. Ryland tried to throw a punch, a desperate, sloppy swing. Dante caught his fist in midair, his grip crushing. He spun Ryland around and slammed him face first into the hood of the black sedan. The metal groaned under the impact. Dante leaned in, pinning Ryland with his body weight, twisting Ryland's arm up behind his back until Ryland shrieked in pain. Dante's face was inches from Ryland's ear. When he spoke, his voice was not a shout. It was a whisper, intimate and terrifyingly calm. "I told you," Dante said, the words distinct and sharp. "I told you what would happen if you touched her." Ryland whimpered, pressed against the cold metal. "I did not know. I did not know she called you." "That does not matter," Dante murmured. "You touched what is mine." Dante pulled back slightly, only to slam Ryland's head against the hood 1 more time, not enough to kill, but enough to ensure a concussion and a broken nose. Ryland slid down the front of the car, leaving a smear of blood on the paint, and collapsed into a heap on the ground. Silence fell over the alley. The only sound was the heavy breathing of Dante's enforcers standing over the unconscious goons. Dante turned slowly. The rage that had radiated from him seemed to retract, pulled back under a layer of iron control, though his chest was heaving. He looked for Maya. She was huddled on the ground near the dumpster, shivering uncontrollably. Her jeans were torn at the knee, dark blood staining the denim. Her hair was matted, and her face was pale as a sheet. Dante's expression crumbled. The lethal mask dissolved into raw distress. He rushed to her, ignoring the grime of the alley floor as he dropped to his knees beside her. "Maya," he said, his voice rough. She flinched when he reached for her, a reflex she couldn't stop. Dante froze instantly, his hands hovering in the air. "It is me," he said softly. "It is Dante. You are safe. Look at me." Maya forced her eyes to focus. She saw the familiar sharp jawline, the dark eyes that held no malice, only worry. She saw the expensive Italian suit now stained with alley dirt where his knees pressed into the ground. "Dante," she whispered, her teeth chattering. "I am here," he said. He reached out slowly, telegraphing every movement. He placed one hand gently on her shoulder and the other on the small of her back. He felt solid, real. "Can you stand?" he asked. I think so. My leg." A car hit me. Dante's jaw tightened, a fresh wave of fury passing through his eyes, but he pushed it down. "Okay, I have you. I am going to pick you up. Is that okay?" Maya nodded weakly. Dante slipped one arm under her knees and the other around her back, lifting her as if she weighed nothing. Maya gasped at the movement, pain shooting through her hip, and buried her face in the crook of his neck. He smelled like safety. He carried her to his waiting car. Marco had the back door open. Dante settled her onto the leather seats with a tenderness that belied the violence he had just dispensed. "Take us to the clinic," Dante ordered his driver. "Now." The clinic was quiet, a private facility on the outskirts of the city that catered to clients who valued discretion above all else. The walls were painted a soothing cream color, and there was no smell of antiseptic, only a faint scent of lavender. Dante stood in the hallway outside the examination room. He had taken off his jacket, his white dress shirt rolled up to the elbows. There was a smear of blood on his cuff, Ryland's blood. He stood with his arms crossed, staring at the abstract painting on the wall without seeing it. His mind was replaying the phone call, the sound of her fear. The door opened, and Evans stepped out. She was a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and a steel spine, one of the few people Dante trusted completely. "How is she?" Dante asked, stepping forward. "She is battered." "Doctor," Evans said, removing her glasses. "Severe bruising on the hip and ribs from the impact. Mild concussion, cuts and scrapes on her hands and knees, but nothing is broken. She is lucky." Dante let out a breath he didn't realize he had been holding. "Physically. She will heal quickly," the doctor continued, her voice lowering, but looking at the old scars. "The way she reacts to sudden movements. This isn't just about tonight, is it?" Dante shook his head. "No, it is not. The men who did this, they are part of her history. Doctor." Evans nodded slowly. "She needs rest, and she needs to feel safe. True safety, not just a locked door. Can I see her? Go ahead. She's asking for you." Dante walked into the room. Maya was sitting on a leather recovery couch, wrapped in a thick wool blanket. Her knee was bandaged, and there was a small butterfly strip on her cheek. She looked small, lost in the folds of the blanket. She looked up when he entered. Her eyes were still wide, haunted, but the panic had receded into a dull, watchful wariness. "Hey," Dante said softly. He pulled a chair over and sat opposite her, leaning forward, his elbows on his knees. "Hey," Maya whispered. She pulled the blanket tighter around herself. Dante looked at her, searching for the right words. He was used to negotiating deals, ordering hits, managing empires. He was not used to this. "I am sorry," he said. "I should have done more than give you a card. I should have made sure they couldn't get near you." "You came," Maya said. You came for me. I will always come for you, Dante said. The intensity in his voice made her breath hitch. He took a deep breath. Maya, you can't go back to your apartment. They know where you live. Rylan is indisposed for the moment, but his organization is large. It is not safe. Maya looked down at her hands. I do not have anywhere else to go. I do not have money for a hotel, and my family is... I have a place, Dante interrupted gently. A safe house. It is a penthouse in a building I own. 24-hour security. Private elevator. No one gets in unless I say so. Maya's head snapped up. I can't ask you to do that. You are not asking. I am offering. Maya hesitated. The fear of men with power was ingrained in her DNA now. Men who offered things usually wanted something in return. Contracts, favors, silence. She looked at Dante. She looked for the hidden agenda, the lust, the greed. She saw only a burning, desperate need to see her safe. What do you want in return? She asked, her voice trembling. Dante looked pained. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. I just want you to sleep through the night without being afraid. That is it. He held her gaze, steady and open. Maya felt the tears prick at her eyes again. She was terrified. But the thought of going back to her dark, lonely apartment, waiting for the door to be kicked in, was worse. Okay, she whispered. Okay. Dante nodded. He stood up and held out his hand again. Let us get you home. The ride up to the penthouse was silent. The elevator was glass, rising high above the city of Havenport. The lights of the skyline spread out below them, a grid of gold and white against the darkness. Maya stood next to Dante. She was limping slightly, favoring her bruised hip. The adrenaline was fading, leaving her exhausted and trembling. The elevator hummed smoothly. The space was small, intimate. Dante shifted slightly, blocking the view of the glass wall as if to shield her from the height. As he moved, his shoulder brushed against hers. It was a light contact, accidental, but Maya didn't pull away. Through the layers of his shirt and her jacket, she could feel the heat of his body. It radiated a strange warmth that seemed to seep into her frozen bones. It wasn't the suffocating heat of confinement she was used to. It was the warmth of a hearth fire in winter. She glanced up at him. He was looking straight ahead, his profile sharp and serious. Watching the numbers climb, he was a dangerous man. She'd seen that tonight in the alley. She'd seen the way he broke people, but he hadn't broken her. He had put himself between her and the world. For the first time since the car began stalking her on that quiet street, Maya's pulse slowed to a normal rhythm. She leaned, just a fraction of an inch, into that warmth. Dante didn't move away. He stood like a sentinel, silent and steadfast, as the doors opened into the sanctuary he had built for her. The elevator doors slid open with a soft chime, revealing a space that defied every expectation Maya held about a mafia safe house. She had braced herself for cold minimalism, black leather, chrome, empty surfaces that echoed the sterile danger of the men who inhabited them. She expected a fortress that felt like a prison. Instead, the penthouse was warm. The lighting was low and amber-hued, casting long, soft shadows across floors covered in thick, woven rugs that looked like they would swallow the sound of footsteps. There were books, hundreds of them stacked on shelves that lined the far wall, their spines creased and worn. A large, overstuffed sofa in a deep charcoal fabric dominated the center of the room, draped with a knitted throw that looked genuinely used. The air did not smell of bleach or gun oil. It smelled of cedar and something faintly spicy, like cinnamon or clove. Dante stepped out of the elevator first, his hand hovering near her back without touching her, guiding her into the room. "Welcome home for now," he said quietly. Before Maya could process the strange comfort of the room, a woman bustled in from the hallway leading to the kitchen. She was short and stout, with iron-gray hair pulled back into a severe bun, but her face was round and lined with decades of expressive living. She wore a simple navy dress and an apron that looked like it had seen 1,000 Sunday dinners. "This is Lucia," Dante said, his voice softening with evident affection. "She runs my life. I just pay the bills." Lucia huffed. wiping her hands on her apron as she marched up to Maya. She did not look at Dante. Her dark eyes scanned Maya with a critical, surgical precision, taking in the bruised cheek, the way Maya favored her left leg, and the exhaustion etched into the hollows of her eyes. "You look like a stiff wind would blow you over," Lucia declared, her accent thick and rolling. "And you are too thin." "Does he feed you?" "No, of course not. He barely feeds himself." "Lucia," Dante started, a hint of amusement in his tone. "Hush." Lucia cut him off. She reached out, her hands calloused and warm, and gently took Maya's cold hands in hers. "You are safe here. Tesoro, I have made the guest room ready. Clean sheets, hot water in the shower, and I put a fresh towel on the warmer." Maya blinked, overwhelmed by the sudden, aggressive maternal energy. "Thank you," she whispered. Lucia clicked her tongue, shaking her head at Maya's injuries. "Go, shower, sleep. We will deal with the world tomorrow. Tonight, you rest." Lucia steered Maya toward a hallway, and for the first time in years, Maya let someone else take the lead without terrifying suspicion. She glanced back once. Dante was standing in the center of the living room, watching them go. He looked tired, the adrenaline of the alley fight fading to reveal the weight he carried. But when he caught her eye, he offered a small, reassuring nod. The guest room was a sanctuary of soft blues and creams. The shower was hot enough to steam away the grime of the city, and the bed was a cloud that pulled her under the moment her head hit the pillow. She slept without dreaming, a deep, black, restorative sleep that she had not known she was capable of. Sunlight, pale and filtered through sheer curtains, woke her. For a moment, panic seized her chest, the disorientation of waking up in a strange room. Then the memories of the night before flooded back, the alley, the car, Dante. She was safe. Maya sat up, wincing as her bruised ribs protested the movement. Her body felt stiff, battered but clean. She swung her legs out of bed, finding a plush robe left folded on the chair nearby. A scent drifted under the door. Coffee. Rich, dark, expensive coffee. And the unmistakable, grounding smell of frying bacon. Hunger, sharp and demanding, woke up in her stomach. She realized she had not eaten since a granola bar at the print shop yesterday afternoon. She tightened the belt of the robe and opened the door, padding silently down the hallway toward the kitchen. The kitchen was an open concept space with a massive island made of butcher block and dark stone. Sunlight poured in through floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a dizzying view of the city skyline. Dante was there. He was not the terrifying enforcer from the alley. He was not the untouchable kingpin in the tailored suit. He was barefoot. He wore dark gray sweatpants and a black t-shirt that clung to his back. He stood at the stove, a spatula in hand, flipping eggs with a practiced wrist. His hair was messy, falling over his forehead, and on the counter next to him. His phone was on speaker. "We cannot hold the shipment at the docks for another 3 days. Marco," Dante was saying, his voice low and calm, contrasting sharply with the domestic activity of cooking breakfast. "Tell the union rep that if the crates are not moved by noon, I am renegotiating our contract regarding his pension fund." A pause as the person on the other end spoke. No violence," Dante corrected, cracking pepper over the eggs. "Just financial ruin. It is far more effective. And tell Sal to keep the perimeter around the building tight if a delivery driver so much as sneezes near the service entrance. I want to know about it." Maya stood in the doorway, frozen by the cognitive dissonance. Here was a man discussing the destruction of a union leader's financial future while perfectly seasoning breakfast. Dante turned. Sensing her presence, his eyes swept over her, checking her state just as he had done the night before. He noted the robe, the damp hair, the slightly better color in her cheeks. "Morning," he said, reaching over to tap the phone screen to end the call. "Good morning," Maya said, her voice raspy with sleep. "Hungry?" Dante asked. "Lucia went to the market. She left strict instructions that I was to make sure you ate protein. If I fail, she will likely hide my car keys." Maya managed a small, tentative smile. "It seems unwise to cross her." "Deadly," Dante agreed. He plated the eggs and bacon, sliding a plate across the island toward one of the high stools. He poured a mug of coffee and set it down beside the plate, pushing a small pitcher of cream and a bowl of sugar toward her. "Sit," he commanded, though the tone was an invitation, not an order. Maya climbed onto the stool. The food smelled incredible. She took a sip of the coffee. It was perfect, and picked up her fork. Dante leaned his hip against the counter opposite her, holding his own mug, watching her eat. He didn't speak for a long time, letting her wake up, letting the food settle her. It wasn't until she had finished half the eggs that he spoke. "Rylan is in the hospital," Dante said quietly. "A broken nose, a concussion, and a shattered knee. He will not be walking without a cane for a very long time." Maya's hand froze halfway to her mouth. She set the fork down slowly. The name brought a chill into the warm, sunlit kitchen. "And the others?" she asked, staring at her plate. "Gone," Dante said. "They have been encouraged to leave the state." Maya let out a shaky breath. She traced the rim of her coffee mug with a trembling finger. "Thank you," she said. "But Rylan is just a symptom. He's not the disease." Dante set his mug down. His face grew serious, his dark eyes focusing entirely on her. "Tell me," he said. It was not a demand for information to use as leverage. It was an offer to share the burden. Maya looked out the window at the sprawling city. It looked so peaceful from up here, silent and gleaming, down there, in the shadows. It was a different world. "I was 19, she began, her voice quiet. "I was working at a diner. A woman came in. She told me I had a unique look. She gave me a card for a modeling agency. It looked legitimate. They had a website, an office downtown." She paused, swallowing the lump in her throat. Dante didn't move. He didn't rush her. "I signed a contract," she continued. "It was 50 pages long. I didn't understand half of the legal terms. I thought it was my way out of poverty. But then the shoots changed. They weren't fashion anymore. They were private parties." Dante's jaw tightened. A muscle jumped in his cheek. "When I tried to say no, Rylan showed me the contract," Maya said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "There were clauses about repayment of training costs, image rights, penalties. They said I owed them $40,000. They said if I left, they would sue my mother. They would take her house. So I stayed." She looked up at Dante, shame burning in her chest. "They took my passport. They moved me into a house with 6 other girls, and they started filming. Not just photos. They sold the videos online. Rylan was the one who made sure we smiled. He was the one who stood behind the camera and told us what would happen if we cried." Dante's hand, resting on the marble countertop, curled into a fist. The knuckles turned white. The veins in his forearm stood out against the tan skin. The violence she had seen in the alley was bubbling just beneath the surface, a terrifying, destructive force. But he did not look at her with disgust. He did not look at her with pity. He looked at her with a fury so profound it felt like a physical weight in the room, but it was directed entirely outward, away from her. He took a deep breath, visibly forcing his hand to relax, finger by finger. He picked up the coffee pot and refilled her mug. His movements deliberate and controlled. "He's going to lose more than a knee," Dante said. His voice was devoid of emotion, which made it infinitely more terrifying. "I escaped 6 months ago," Maya whispered. "I climbed out a bathroom window during a party. I have been running ever since. But they always find me." "They will not find you here," Dante said, "and they will not be looking for much longer." The intensity in the kitchen was suffocating. The air felt thick with the ghosts of her past and the promise of his violence. Dante seemed to realize it. He set the coffee pot down and stepped back, breaking the heavy silence. "Come," he said abruptly. "Leave the dishes. I want to show you something." He led her away from the kitchen, through the living room, and toward the large glass doors that opened onto the terrace. He slid the door open, and the cool autumn wind rushed in, sweeping away the scent of bacon and the heavy atmosphere of confession. Maya stepped out. The balcony was massive, running the length of the penthouse. It was lined with stone planters filled with hardy, wind-resistant shrubs, but the real attraction was the view. Havenport lay spread out like a map. To the east, The gray water of the harbor churned under the morning sky. To the west, the dense grid of the city gave way to the rolling hills of the suburbs. "It is beautiful," Maya said, leaning her hands on the cold metal railing. "From up here, you can't see the cracks in the pavement." "No," Dante said, moving to stand beside her. "From up here, you can see everything coming. That is why I bought it." He was standing close, not crowding her, but close enough that she could feel his presence as a solid, warm anchor against the biting wind. He had put on his suit jacket before coming outside, shielding himself against the chill, but she was still just in the robe. A gust of wind whipped around the corner of the building, cutting through the thin fabric. Maya shivered violently, her shoulders hunching up toward her ears. Without a word, Dante stepped closer. He shrugged off his heavy wool jacket in one fluid motion. "Here," he murmured. He draped the jacket over her shoulders. It was heavy, warm, and smelled of him, sandalwood, clean laundry, and the faint, sharp scent of the ocean air. Maya gripped the lapels, pulling it tighter around herself. "Thank you." Dante did not step back. He stood facing her now, blocking the wind with his body. He looked down at her, his dark eyes searching her face, reading the map of her trauma and her resilience. His gaze dropped to her collarbone, where the robe had slipped slightly. His fingers brushed the skin there as he adjusted the jacket. A feather-light touch that sent a jolt of electricity straight down her spine. Maya stopped breathing. The wind whipped her hair across her face, strands of it sticking to her lip. Dante lifted his hand slowly. He moved with the caution of someone approaching a startled deer. He gave her every opportunity to flinch, to step back, to tell him to stop. Maya didn't move. She couldn't. Her heart was hammering against her ribs, but it wasn't the erratic, terrified rhythm of the alley. It was a heavy, thudding beat of anticipation. Dante's knuckles grazed her cheek as he tucked the wayward strand of hair behind her ear. His skin was rough, warm, and shockingly gentle. His hand lingered there, cupping her jaw, his thumb brushing against the hollow of her cheekbone. Maya's lashes fluttered, her chest tightened. A strange, foreign heat bloomed in her stomach. For years, the touch of a man had meant pain, coercion, or ownership. She had trained herself to freeze, to dissociate, to endure. But this felt like being seen. Dante's eyes darkened. He lowered his head slightly, his face inches from hers. She could feel the warmth of his breath on her lips. His gaze dropped to her mouth, lingering there with an intensity that made her knees weak. Before rising back to her eyes, he was asking. Silently, without a word, he was asking for permission. Maya's fingers curled into the fabric of his jacket. She wanted to lean in. She wanted to close the distance and erase the memories of every other man with the touch of this one, but the instinct was new, and her body was still a map of old scars. A tremor ran through her, not of fear, exactly, but of overwhelming vulnerability. She trembled under his hand. Dante felt it instantly. He stepped back. It was immediate. He withdrew his hand, putting a polite 2 feet of distance between them. The intense, magnetic charge in the air didn't dissipate, but he severed the physical connection before she could even decide if she was ready for it. "I will not rush you." "Maya," he said, his voice low and rough. Maya blinked, feeling a sudden, sharp loss at the absence of his heat. I didn't mean to." "Do not apologize," Dante interrupted gently. "Listen to me." He waited until she met his eyes. "You are safe here, and my protection is not a transaction. You do not have to pay for it with your body, or your affection, or anything else. I am doing this because I want to, because I cannot stand the thought of anyone hurting you. That is all." Maya's throat tightened. Tears pricked at the corners of her eyes, not from sadness, but from a gratitude so profound it hurt. She had forgotten that men could give without taking. "Why?" she whispered. "Why me?" Dante looked at her, and for a moment, his guard dropped completely. He looked almost sad. "Because," he said softly, "looking at you is the first time in a long time that I have wanted to be a better man than I am." He cleared his throat. the moment becoming too heavy, too revealing. "Lucia made lunch," he said, his voice returning to its usual steady cadence. "We should go inside before you freeze." That night, the penthouse was quiet. Dante had gone out, business that couldn't be handled from a kitchen island, leaving Maya alone with Lucia, who had fed her soup and told her stories about her grandchildren until Maya's eyelids grew heavy. Now, lying in the soft, comfortable bed in the guest room, Maya stared at the ceiling. The room was dark, save for the city glow filtering through the curtains. She raised her hand slowly to her face. Her fingers traced the line of her jaw, the spot where Dante's knuckles had grazed her skin. She closed her eyes, replaying the moment on the balcony. She remembered the heat of his body, the weight of his jacket, the way he had looked at her mouth like it was something precious, not something to be consumed. She had trembled. She had been scared. But beneath the fear, there had been a spark, a hunger. For the first time in 3 years, the idea of a man touching her didn't make her want to scrub her skin raw. It made her wonder. It made her wonder what it would feel like to not pull away. She turned onto her side, pulling the duvet up to her chin. Dante Moretti was a dangerous man, a criminal, a killer, perhaps, but in the dark, with the memory of his gentle hand on her face. Maya realized that the danger he posed to her wasn't physical. The danger was that for the first time. She might actually want to let someone in. The dining table in the penthouse had been transformed into a war room. For the past 3 days, the sleek mahogany surface had disappeared beneath a chaotic sea of manila folders, printed screenshots, and a laptop that hummed with the heat of overuse. The panoramic view of Havenport glittering outside the floor-to-ceiling windows was ignored, the city's beauty forgotten in favor of its ugliest secrets. Maya sat hunched over a stack of printed emails, a highlighter gripped so tightly in her hand that her knuckles were white. The silence in the room was heavy, broken only by the rustle of paper and the occasional rhythmic tapping of Dante's fingers on his keyboard. He sat across from her, his suit jacket discarded on a nearby chair, his crisp white shirt unbuttoned at the collar and sleeves rolled up to his elbows. He looked like a man consuming data, his dark eyes scanning bank records and shell company registrations with a terrifying efficiency. "Here," Maya whispered, her voice cracking. Dante stopped typing instantly. He looked up, his gaze sharpening. "What did you find?" Maya pushed a sheet of paper across the table with a trembling hand. It was a printout of an old email thread from the modeling agency, dated 2 years ago. "This name," she said, pointing to a recipient listed only as Viper Logistics. "I saw that name on a shipping manifest once. Rylan left it on his desk when he was yelling at someone on the phone. He was panicked. He said if the shipment was late, the serpents would skin him alive." Dante took the paper, his expression darkening. "The Black Serpents," he murmured, the name sounding like a curse. "They are a rival syndicate. Messy, violent. They deal in things I do not touch." He looked at Maya, seeing the way her shoulders were drawn up toward her ears, the way her breathing had become shallow and rapid. She was not just reading words on a page, she was reliving the fear those words represented. Every name was a memory of a locked door. Every date was a reminder of a night she had tried to forget. Dante closed the folder in his hand with a definitive snap. "That is enough," he said. Maya blinked, looking up at him with wide, startled eyes. "But we are not done. There is still a whole stack of—" "We are done for tonight," Dante interrupted, his voice firm but gentle. He stood up, walking around the table to where she sat. He reached down and physically closed the laptop screen, severing the connection to the digital nightmare they had been wading through. "You have been staring at these papers for 6 hours. Maya, your hands are shaking. You are ghost pale. If we keep going, you are going to shatter. And I did not bring you here to break you. I have to help," Maya argued weakly, though she didn't resist when he took the highlighter from her hand and set it on the table. "I need to make sure they can't hurt anyone else. And you will," Dante promised, "but not tonight. Tonight, you need to be something other than a victim or a witness. You need to just be Maya." He held out a hand to her. "Come." Maya hesitated, looking at the mess on the table as if leaving it would allow the monsters to escape. But Dante's hand was steady, waiting. She reached out and took it. His grip was warm, grounding her instantly. He led her away from the dining area, turning off the harsh overhead lights as they went, leaving the workspace in shadow. He guided her to the living room, where the amber lamps cast a soft, forgiving glow over the plush furniture. "Sit," he instructed, pointing to the deep charcoal sofa. Maya sank into the cushions, her body feeling heavy now that the adrenaline of the investigation was fading. She watched as Dante moved to a vintage record player in the corner. He selected a vinyl disc with care, sliding it from its sleeve and setting the needle down. The room filled with the rich, melancholic sound of a jazz saxophone, slow and smooth like honey. It was a sound that demanded a slower heartbeat. Dante walked to the small bar cart and poured 2 glasses of sparkling water with lemon. Skipping the alcohol, he brought them over and sat down next to her. He did not sit in the armchair across the room. He sat on the sofa, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from him, but far enough to leave a polite buffer of space. He draped his arm along the back of the couch, his posture relaxed, signaling that there was no danger here. "Talk to me," Dante said, taking a sip of his water. "About the case?" Maya asked, reaching for her glass. "No," Dante said, shaking his head. "Absolutely not about the case. Talk to me about anything else. Talk to me about the weather. Talk to me about the painting on the wall. Talk to me about who you were before you met Rylan Kane." Maya stared into her glass, watching the bubbles rise to the surface. It was a strange question. For years, she'd only been defined by what she was surviving. She'd forgotten how to talk about the parts of herself that weren't scars. "I used to draw," she said softly. Dante shifted slightly, angling his body toward her. "Draw? Like portraits?" "Graphic design, mostly," she said, a small, shy smile touching her lips. "But I loved sketching with charcoal. I wanted to design album covers for bands. You know, the kind of art that makes you want to listen to the music before you even know what it sounds like." Dante watched her face. He saw the way the tension around her eyes softened as she spoke about something she loved. "I can see that," he said. "You have an eye for detail. You noticed the discrepancy in the dates on those invoices before I did." Maya laughed, a short, surprised sound. "That is not exactly artistic talent. That is just paranoia." "It is observation," Dante corrected. "And art requires observation. Did you go to school for it?" "I did. For a year," Maya said, relaxing back into the cushions. "Before everything happened. I loved the studio classes, the smell of graphite and fixative spray. There was this one professor, old Mr. Henderson, who used to throw erasers at us if we tried to make things look too perfect. He said, 'Life is messy. Stop trying to clean it up.'" Dante chuckled, a low rumble that vibrated through the couch frame. "He sounds like a wise man." "He was?" Maya agreed. She turned her head to look at him. Her eyes were bright, animated by the memory. "I miss it. I haven't picked up a pencil in 3 years. I was too afraid to leave a trail, too afraid to want anything that could be taken away." Dante's expression softened into something profoundly tender. He looked at her not as a problem to be solved, or a witness to be protected, but as a woman who had been interrupted. "We will get you a sketchbook," he said simply, "tomorrow. I will have Marco pick up every charcoal pencil in the city if you want them." Maya looked at him, her breath catching in her throat. "You would do that?" "I would do a lot of things to see you look the way you look right now," Dante said. "How do I look?" she whispered. "Like you are breathing," he answered. The air in the room seemed to change. The jazz music faded into the background, drowned out by the sudden, thudding volume of Maya's own heart. Dante was watching her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. But it wasn't the predatory stare she was used to. It was a look of reverence. He shifted closer, sliding along the cushions until the space between them evaporated. His arm, which had been resting on the back of the sofa, moved. His hand descended slowly, landing lightly on the back of her neck. Maya froze for a microsecond, instinct screaming at her to run. but then his thumb brushed against the sensitive skin at the base of her skull. It was a soothing, rhythmic stroke. He wasn't grabbing her, he was grounding her. "Relax," he murmured, and to her shock, she did. Her head tipped back slightly, leaning into his touch. Dante's eyes dropped to her mouth. The movement was undisguised. He wanted her. The realization didn't bring fear. It brought a sudden, rushing wave of heat that pooled low in her stomach. Maya turned her body fully toward him. She braced one hand against his chest to steady herself. Under her palm, she could feel the hard muscle and the steady, heavy beat of his heart. It was beating fast, just like hers. Dante leaned in. He moved slowly, giving her a dozen chances to pull away, to turn her head, to stop him. She didn't stop him. She lifted her chin, her eyes fluttering shut, when his lips met hers. It was not an explosion. It was a question asked and answered in silence. It was soft, tentative, almost chaste. He tasted of sparkling water and mint, cool and clean. Maya let out a small sigh against his mouth, her fingers curling into the crisp cotton of his shirt. That small sound seemed to break the last of Dante's restraint. He groaned low in his throat, and the kiss deepened. It wasn't tentative anymore. It was hungry. His hand slid from the nape of her neck, tangling into her hair, tilting her head back to deepen the angle. His other hand moved from the couch to her waist, his large palm spreading over the curve of her hip, pulling her flesh against him. Maya gasped, opening to him, and he took the invitation, his tongue sweeping into her mouth with a possessive heat that made her head spin. She found herself leaning forward, climbing into his space until she was practically straddling his lap, her knees on the sofa cushions on either side of his legs. It was overwhelming. It was electric. For the first time in years, her body was not a vessel for fear. It was alive with sensation. She felt the roughness of his jaw against her soft skin, the strength of the arm wrapped around her waist, holding her securely but not trapping her. Dante's hand moved higher, skimming up her side. His fingers pressed into the fabric of her blouse, tracing the line of her ribs. The sensation of fingers digging into her ribs triggered a synapse in her brain that had nothing to do with pleasure. Flashback. A dark room, Ryland's laugh, a heavy hand grabbing her ribcage, fingers digging in hard enough to bruise, holding her in place while the camera flashed. "Hold still, darling. Don't you dare move." The memory hit her with the force of a physical blow. Maya's body went rigid. The heat vanished, replaced instantly by ice-cold terror. She gasped, a sharp, ragged sound of panic, and jerked back. She shoved against Dante's chest, her eyes flying open, wide and unseeing. "No!" she choked out. Dante reacted faster than she could have imagined. The moment he felt her tense, the moment he heard the change in her breathing, he was gone. He lifted both hands into the air, palms open and visible, showing her he held no weapons, no restraint. He slid back on the couch, putting 3 feet of distance between them in a heartbeat. "Maya," he said. His voice was not the lover's growl from seconds ago. It was the calm, commanding voice of the protector. "Maya, look at me." Maya was hyperventilating. She pulled her knees up to her chest, wrapping her arms around herself, rocking slightly. Tears burned her eyes. The shame was almost worse than the fear. She had ruined it. She was broken. "I am sorry," she sobbed, burying her face in her hands. "I am sorry. I am so sorry. I didn't mean to I just—" "Hey," Dante said. He did not move closer. He stayed exactly where he was, respecting the perimeter she needed. "Stop apologizing." He reached for the glass of water on the table and slid it across the coffee table toward her, keeping his movements slow and broadcasted. "Drink," he said gently. "Just a sip." Maya reached for the glass with shaking hands. She took a sip, the cold water shocking her system back to the present. She looked at Dante. He looked wrecked, not angry, not frustrated, but pained that he had been the cause of her fear. "I ruined the moment," she whispered, wiping at her eyes. "You were being so nice, and I freaked out." "You did not ruin anything," Dante said firmly. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, looking her dead in the eye. "Nothing is ruined. It is just paused." He waited until she absorbed the words. "Maya, listen to me. You have been through hell. Your body is trying to protect you. That is a good thing. It means you are a survivor. But I want to be normal," she confessed, her voice breaking. I wanted to be close to you, and we will get there," Dante promised. "But my vow to you stands. I am here to keep you safe. That includes keeping you safe from me if I move too fast. I am not going anywhere. I have the patience of a saint when it matters. And for you, I have all the time in the world." Maya looked at him, searching for the lie, but found only absolute sincerity. The knot of anxiety in her chest began to loosen. "Now," Dante said, shifting his tone to something lighter, almost brisk. "I believe we were discussing album covers. If you were going to design a cover for this jazz record, what would it look like?" Maya blinked, surprised by the sudden pivot. What?" "The record," Dante said, gesturing to the player. "It is monochrome. Boring. How would you fix it?" Maya took a shaky breath, realizing what he was doing. He was building a bridge back to the safe ground. He was giving her a way out of the trauma spiral. "I would use blue," she sniffled, a small, watery smile appearing. "Deep indigo, maybe a streetlight reflecting on a wet pavement." Dante smiled, the tension leaving his shoulders. "See? You are better already. Indigo sounds perfect." 2 hours later, the penthouse was silent. Maya had gone to bed, exhausted by the emotional roller coaster of the evening. Dante had stayed up, pacing the length of the living room, a tumbler of whiskey in his hand that he hadn't taken a sip of yet. He picked up his phone and dialed. Lorenzo picked up on the first ring. "Yeah, boss. I need you to speed up the timeline on the serpents," Dante said. His voice was rough, scraping against the silence. "We are moving as fast as we can. Dante, these things take time to dismantle properly without starting a street war. Why? Is the girl okay?" Dante walked to the window, looking out at the city lights. "No, she's not okay. She's trying to be. But they broke something inside her. Lorenzo." There was a pause on the line. Then Lorenzo spoke, his voice cautious. "You sound personal. Dante, you know the rules. If you get too close, you get sloppy. She is a witness. She is an asset." "She is not an asset," Dante snapped, his reflection in the glass looking darker, more dangerous than usual. "She is important. I'm just saying." "Be careful," Lorenzo warned. "If the serpents find out she is your weak spot, they will use it. They already know she is here," Dante said. "Just get it done. I want Ryland's network burned to the ground. I want nothing left but ash." He hung up before Lorenzo could argue. Across the city, in a derelict warehouse near the shipping yards, the air smelled of rust and stagnant water. Rain hammered against the corrugated metal roof. Ryland Kane sat in a wheelchair, his leg encased in a heavy plaster cast propped up on a crate. His face was a mess of bruising, his nose taped and swollen, purple circles under his eyes. He looked diminished, pathetic, but the hatred in his eyes was burning brighter than ever. Standing in the shadows of the warehouse was a tall, thin man with a tattoo of a snake coiling up his neck. "Silas, the leader of the Black Serpents. You look like garbage." "Kane," Silas noted, his voice dry and scratching. "Moretti did this," Ryland spat, gripping the armrests of the wheelchair. "He thinks he can just take what is mine. He thinks he can break my knee and walk away." "You lost the girl," Silas said, lighting a cigarette. "That cost us money. My buyers are not happy." "Forget the buyers," Ryland shouted, then winced as the motion jarred his broken nose. "This is about Moretti now. He has her. He's keeping her in his penthouse like a pet." Silas exhaled a plume of smoke. "Moretti is careful. He does not let people in. If he has taken this girl in, if he broke his own rules for her, then she is valuable to him. She is nothing." Ryland sneered. "Just a waitress with a pretty face." "No," Silas corrected. "To him. She's evidently more than that, and that makes her useful." Silas stepped into the light. He smiled, showing teeth that looked too sharp. "We have been trying to get a foothold in the downtown territory for years," Silas said. "Moretti has always been untouchable. No weaknesses, no family. But now, Now he has a heart beating in that penthouse. "What are you saying?" Rylan asked. "I am saying we do not need to attack Moretti directly," Silas said. "We just need to make him believe he can't protect her. We draw him out, we make him reckless, and then we kill him." "And the girl?" Rylan asked, a cruel hope lighting up his eyes. "Once Moretti is dead?" Silas shrugged, flicking ash onto the concrete floor. "You can have her back. You can finish what you started." Rylan smiled. It was a grotesque expression on his battered face. "I know exactly how to get to her," Rylan whispered. "I know what she is afraid of." "Good," Silas said. "Then let us write the invitation." The photographs were spread across the dining table like a collage of horrors. They were grainy surveillance shots taken by Dante's scouts, a nondescript industrial park on the edge of the city, a row of beige metal units that looked innocent to the untrained eye. But to Maya, they looked like the mouth of a beast. "It is Unit 4, Maya said, her voice barely rising above the hum of the refrigerator. She stood by the table, her arms wrapped tightly around her waist, staring at the picture of a heavy steel door with a keypad lock. Her complexion was pale, the color drained away by the memories the image evoked, but she did not look away. "Are you certain?" Dante asked. He stood beside her, his presence a warm, solid weight against the chill that seemed to radiate from the photos. He did not pressure her. He simply waited for her confirmation. Maya nodded, extending a trembling finger to point at a ventilation fan on the side of the building. "I am certain," she whispered. "That is where they keep the servers. And the archives." Rylan used to brag about it. He called it the vault. He said everything they ever filmed, every contract, every piece of blackmail material was stored in there. He said it was his insurance policy. Dante stared at the building in the photo. His face was a mask of cold, calculated fury. He was not looking at a warehouse. He was looking at the cage that had held her. "Thank you, Maya," Dante said, his voice low and rough. "That is all I needed." He reached for the photos to gather them up, intending to spare her the sight of them. But Maya's hand shot out, catching his wrist. Her grip was weak, shaking but desperate. "You have to destroy it," she said, her eyes wide and pleading. "Not just take it. You have to destroy it. If those videos exist, if they get out—" Dante turned his hand over, interlacing his fingers with hers. He squeezed gently, a promise made in the pressure of his skin against hers. "I am not just going to take them, Maya," he vowed, his dark eyes locking onto hers. "I am going to burn it all down. By the time I am finished, there will be nothing left of your past but ash." 6 hours later, the silence of the industrial park was shattered by the sound of failing steel. Dante moved through the corridors of the storage facility with a shotgun in one hand and a crowbar in the other. He was flanked by 4 of his best men, but he led the charge. This was not just business. It was an exorcism. The facility was poorly guarded. Rylan and his associates had relied on secrecy rather than strength, assuming no one would ever find the heart of their operation. They were wrong. Dante kicked open the door to the server room. The air inside was cool and hummed with the sound of cooling fans. Rows of black towers blinked with green and amber lights, digital catacombs where thousands of hours of exploitation were preserved. "Find the hard drives," Dante ordered. His men went to work, ripping cables from the walls and prying open the server casings. Dante moved to the main terminal. He wasn't interested in the evidence for the police, not yet. He was looking for a specific file directory. He typed in a command, bypassing the weak encryption with the codes Maya had remembered seeing over Rylan's shoulder. The file list scrolled down the screen. Names. Dates. He found it. Collins. M. The rage that hit him was white-hot and blinding. Seeing her name reduced to a file size, a commodity to be traded and sold, made his blood roar in his ears. He didn't just want to delete it. He wanted to kill it. He located the physical drive corresponding to the file. He yanked it out of the bay, metal screeching against metal. It was a small, unassuming black box. It weighed nothing, yet it held the weight of her entire nightmare. Dante set it on the concrete floor. He raised the crowbar. With a primal grunt of effort, he brought the iron bar down, the plastic casing shattered. He swung again. Circuit boards crunched. He swung again, and again, and again. He did not stop until the drive was nothing but sparkling dust and twisted metal shards. Each strike felt cathartic, a physical blow against the men who had hurt her. He moved to the next drive, and the next. He smashed every piece of storage media in the room. He destroyed the backups. He destroyed the archives. When he was done, he stood amidst the wreckage of silicon and plastic, chest heaving, sweat dripping down his forehead. "Boss," Marco called out from the doorway, holding a stack of physical ledgers. "We have the paper trail. We have everything we need to bury them." "Good," Dante said, wiping his brow with the back of his hand. "Let us go." While Dante was dismantling the digital archive of Maya's trauma, a phone vibrated in the pocket of a man standing guard by the rear exit of the penthouse building. Enzo had been with the Moretti family for 5 years. He was quiet, reliable, and invisible. He was also deeply in debt to a loan shark who had recently sold that debt to the Black Serpents. Enzo checked the text message. It was a simple question. "Is the coast clear?" Enzo looked at the security monitors. Dante was gone. Marco was gone. The heavy hitters were all at the raid. It was just Lucia and the girl upstairs, and a skeleton crew in the lobby. Enzo typed back, "Service elevator code is 8842. Third floor access override. He's gone for at least an hour." He hit send, and with that small press of a thumb, he sold his loyalty and Maya's safety for $50,000. Maya needed air. The penthouse was a sanctuary, but after looking at the photos of the warehouse, the walls felt like they were closing in. The luxury apartment felt less like a home and more like a gilded cage. She needed to feel the wind. She needed to see the sky. "I am just going up to the roof garden. Lucia," Maya called out toward the kitchen. Lucia, who was aggressively kneading dough for focaccia, waved a flour-dusted hand. "Take a coat, Tesoro. The wind is sharp today." Maya grabbed a cardigan and took the stairs up to the private rooftop terrace. The garden was a miracle of engineering, a green oasis hovering 50 stories above the concrete grid of Havenport. She walked to the edge, leaning against the glass barrier. The wind whipped her hair around her face, cold and biting, but it felt good. It felt real. She closed her eyes, breathing in the city air. She thought about Dante. She thought about the way he had looked at her this morning, fierce and protective. She thought about the shattered hard drives he had promised her. For the first time, she allowed herself to imagine a future where she didn't have to look over her shoulder. She heard the service door click open behind her. Maya smiled, assuming it was Lucia bringing her tea. "You did not have to come all the way up here." "Lucia," Maya said, turning around. The smile froze on her face. It was not Lucia. Standing by the service entrance, dressed in gray maintenance coveralls that did nothing to hide the malice in his eyes, was Rylan Kane. He was leaning heavily on a cane, his leg encased in a thick cast, his nose taped and swollen purple. Behind him stood 2 men with serpent tattoos visible on their necks. "Hello?" "Darling," Rylan rasped. His voice was thick with congestion from his broken nose, but the smugness was untouched. "Did you miss me?" Maya's blood turned to ice. The world tilted on its axis. It was a nightmare. It had to be a nightmare. She took a step back, her hands hitting the glass barrier. "No," she whispered. Rylan limped forward, the cane clicking rhythmically against the patio stones. "You cost me a lot of money, Maya, and you cost me a perfectly good knee. Did you really think you could just hide in a tower and I would go away?" Maya opened her mouth to scream, to call for Enzo, for Lucia, for anyone. "Don't!" Rylan warned, his eyes flashing. "My friends here are very fast." Maya didn't listen. She drew in a breath to scream, turning to run toward the fire escape on the other side of the garden. The 2 men moved instantly. One of them lunged forward, tackling her before she made it 3 steps. His hand clamped over her mouth, stifling her scream into a muffled, terrified whimper. She kicked out, her heels connecting with shins, but she was small and they were massive. The second man grabbed her flailing arms, pinning them behind her back. Rylan watched, a cruel smile twisting his battered face. "Hold her still," Rylan ordered. A cloth, damp with a sickly sweet chemical smell, was pressed over her nose and mouth. Maya thrashed, panic exploding in her chest. She tried to hold her breath, tried to fight, but the darkness was creeping in at the edges of her vision. She saw Rylan's face swimming before her eyes. She thought of Dante. She thought of the promise he made. "I will always come for you." Then the world went black. Dante was sitting in a booth at a diner 3 blocks from the police precinct. Opposite him sat Detective Miller, a weary man with a graying mustache who drank black coffee and hated human traffickers more than he hated organized crime. "Here is the drive," Dante said, sliding a USB stick across the laminate table. "It contains the financial records of the modeling agency, money laundering, extortion, tax evasion, and the physical location of their archives, which you will find unfortunately destroyed by vandals." Miller picked up the drive, eyeing Dante over the rim of his cup. "Vandals? That is convenient." "Very," Dante agreed. "But the ledger is intact. It is enough to put them away for 20 years. Miller nodded, pocketing the drive. "You know I can't protect you if this blows back. Moretti, I do not need your protection," Dante said, standing up. "I just need you to do your job." Dante's phone buzzed. He pulled it out, expecting a confirmation from Marco that the team was clear. It was a video message. Unknown number. Dante pressed play. The screen showed a dim, dusty room. In the center, illuminated by a harsh work light, was a wooden chair. Maya was tied to it. Her head was lolling forward, hair covering her face. She was unconscious. Ropes dug into her wrists and ankles. Then, Rylan's face came into the frame, filling the screen. He looked deranged, his eyes wide and feverish. "You took my archives." "Dante," Rylan sneered into the camera. "You took my business, so I took yours." The camera panned back to Maya. She stirred, groaning softly, a sound of pure distress. "If you want her back," Rylan said, his voice dropping to a hiss, "come to the old dry dock in the shipyard. Warehouse B, come alone. No guns, no backup. If I see one cop, if I see one of your goons, I will bleed her out before you even get through the door. You have 1 hour." The video cut to black. Dante stared at the phone. For 3 seconds, he did not breathe. He did not move. The diner noise faded into a dull roar. Then, his hands started to shake. It was a tremor of pure, unadulterated rage. It started in his fingers and traveled up his arm, seizing his chest. He felt a darkness rise up in him that was deeper and colder than anything he had ever felt before. They had touched her. They had put their hands on her again. He turned and walked out of the diner without a word to Miller. Outside, Marco was waiting by the car. He took one look at Dante's face and reached for his weapon. "What is it?" Marco asked. "They have her," Dante said. His voice sounded like grinding stones. Marco swore. "The serpents, Rylan, and the serpents. They are at the dry docks. Lorenzo, the consigliere, was in the back seat." He leaned forward, his face pale. "Dante, it is a trap. The dry docks? That is a kill box. You cannot go in there alone." "I am not going alone," Dante said, opening the trunk of the car. He pulled up the false bottom, revealing a cache of military-grade hardware. He stripped off his suit jacket and tossed it onto the pavement. He pulled out a Kevlar vest and strapped it on over his dress shirt, pulling the Velcro tight. "He told me to come alone," Dante said, checking the magazine of a semi-automatic pistol. "He thinks I am a hero. He thinks I will play by the rules to save the damsel." Dante looked up, and his eyes were terrifying. He forgot that I am the villain. "Call everyone," Dante ordered Marco. "I do not care about the noise. I do not care about the police. We are burning that warehouse to the ground with them inside." "And Lucia?" Marco asked. "Tell her to disappear," Dante said, racking the slide of the gun. "If I do not come back, she takes the accounts and vanishes. But I am coming back, and I am bringing Maya with me." Maya woke to the smell of salt water and rot. Her head was pounding, a rhythmic throb that matched the stinging pain in her wrists. She opened her eyes, blinking against the harsh glare of a halogen work light. She was in a warehouse. It was vast and empty, shadows stretching into the rafters. She tried to move her hands, but they were bound tight behind the chair. "Well, look who is awake." Maya looked up. Rylan was sitting on a crate 10 feet away, his cane resting across his knees. 2 men stood in the shadows behind him, holding assault rifles. "You are pathetic," Maya rasped. Her throat was dry, her tongue feeling thick. Rylan laughed, but it was a brittle sound. "Pathetic? I am the one holding the cards. Maya, in 20 minutes, your knight in shining armor is going to walk through those doors, and my friends here are going to cut him into pieces. He's not going to come alone," Maya said. She forced her voice to be steady, channeling the strength she had borrowed from Dante. "He is smarter than you." Rylan stood up, wincing as he put weight on his bad leg. He limped toward her, his face twisting into a scowl. "He is in love with you," Rylan spat. "And men in love are stupid. He will die, Maya, and you are going to watch. And then, you and I are going to have a long conversation about loyalty." He reached out his hand to stroke her cheek. The gesture was possessive, familiar and repulsive. Maya didn't flinch this time. She didn't freeze. The fear was there, pounding in her chest, but beneath it was a burning coal of anger. She was done being the victim. She waited until his hand was inches from her face, then she jerked her head forward and spat at him. "Don't you touch me," she snarled. "You make me sick." Rylan recoiled, wiping his face, his eyes bulging with shock and fury. He raised his hand to strike her. The warehouse doors exploded. It wasn't a knock. It was a detonation. The heavy metal doors were blown off their hinges with a deafening boom that shook the floor. Smoke and debris billowed into the room. Gunfire erupted instantly. It was a wall of noise. Rylan screamed and dove behind a stack of pallets. Scrambling like a rat, the 2 men behind him raised their rifles, but they were too slow. Figures moved through the smoke, tactical, precise, lethal, Dante's inner circle. They dropped the serpent guards with controlled bursts of fire. Dante came through the smoke. He wasn't wearing his suit. He was in a vest, a gun in his hand, his face smeared with soot. He moved with a terrifying singular focus. He didn't look at the shooters. He didn't look at Rylan. He looked for the chair. When he saw her, his face broke. The mask of the warlord cracked, revealing the man beneath. "Maya!" he roared. He sprinted across the open floor, ignoring the stray bullets that pinged off the concrete around him. He slid on his knees to reach her, holstering his weapon and pulling a knife from his belt in one fluid motion. "Dante, behind you!" Maya screamed. Maya. Rylan had popped up from behind the pallets, a pistol in his hand, aiming at Dante's exposed back. Dante didn't turn. Marco, who had followed him in, saw the movement. Marco fired 2 shots. The bullets tore into the wood of the pallet, forcing Rylan to duck back down, cursing. Dante sliced the ropes binding Maya's wrists. He cut the ropes at her ankles. "Can you move?" Dante shouted over the noise of the firefight. "Yes!" Maya cried, her hands fumbling to grab his vest. Dante pulled her up. He didn't immediately run. For one desperate, necessary second, he pulled her against his chest, his arms wrapped around her, crushing her to him. Maya buried her face in the crook of his neck. Smelling the cordite and the sweat and the sandalwood, she felt his heart hammering against her cheek, a frantic, powerful rhythm that matched her own. "I have you." He breathed into her hair. "I have you." He pulled back, gripping her face in his hands, his eyes wild and searching. "Are you hurt? Did they hurt you?" "No," Maya sobbed, breathless. "I am okay." Dante nodded. He turned her toward the door, shielding her body with his own. "Stay behind me," he commanded, drawing his gun again. "Do not let go of my vest. We are leaving." "But Rylan," Maya started. "He is not leaving," Dante said. His voice was final. He began to move, guiding her through the chaos, firing with precision at the shadows where the remaining serpents were hiding. Maya clung to the back of his vest, stumbling over the debris, trusting him to lead her out of hell one last time. The air in the warehouse was choked with dust and the acrid bite of gunpowder. Dante moved Maya toward the shattered exit, his body a shield against the darkness behind them. They were feet away from the cool night air, feet away from safety, when a shadow detached itself from a stack of shipping crates to their right. Rylan Kane emerged like a specter of vengeance. He did not speak. He simply raised his pistol and fired. The sound was deafening in the enclosed space. Dante jerked violently. A line of fire seared across his ribcage on the left side, tearing through the Kevlar vest and grazing the skin beneath. The impact staggered him, but his instinct was faster than the pain. He did not check his wound. He shoved Maya behind him, using his momentum to push her toward the cover of a thick concrete pillar. "Get down!" Dante roared. Raising his own weapon, he fired 2 shots in rapid succession, forcing Ryland to dive back behind a rusted shipping container. The bullets sparked against the metal, sending a shower of orange embers into the gloom. "Go, Maya!" Dante shouted, keeping his gun trained on the spot where Ryland had disappeared. "Run to Marco. Get to the cars." Maya scrambled to her feet behind the pillar. Her heart was hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. She looked at the exit, then back at Dante. He was bleeding. A dark stain was spreading across the side of his dress shirt. Just under the vest, he was alone in the open, exposed, holding the line for her. If she left him, Ryland would flank him. She knew the layout of this place better than Dante did. Ryland had dragged her through these aisles just an hour ago. "I am not going!" Maya shouted back, her voice shaking but defiant. "Maya, do not argue with me," Dante snapped, firing another suppression shot as movement flickered in the shadows. "I am not leaving you," she screamed. She dropped to a crouch, peering around the edge of the pillar. The warehouse was a maze of stacked containers, creating narrow canyons and blind corners. Ryland was moving. She could hear the scrape of his cast dragging on the concrete, the heavy, uneven thud of his steps as he tried to circle around. "He's moving left," Maya yelled, pointing toward a stack of blue crates. "He's trying to get behind you. Dante." Dante didn't question her. He trusted her voice. He spun to his left, leveling his weapon just as Ryland leaned out to take a shot. Dante fired first. Ryland cursed, ducking back as wood splinters exploded from the pallet next to his head. The warehouse fell into a terrifying silence, broken only by the distant wail of sirens closing in. Ryland knew his time was running out. He was trapped, injured and desperate. "You think you can save her? Moretti?" Ryland's voice echoed through the vast space, distorted by the metal walls. He sounded unhinged, breathless with pain and malice. "You think she is some innocent flower? You have no idea what she is. You have no idea what we made her do." Dante's face went granite cold. His eyes narrowed, focusing entirely on the sound of the voice. He moved silently, stepping over debris, closing the distance. "Keep talking," Dante whispered to himself. Maya huddled behind the pillar, her hands pressed over her ears, but Ryland's voice drilled in. He began to describe the nights at the agency. He spoke of the cameras, the men, the way Maya had begged. He used graphic, cruel language, twisting her trauma into a weapon designed to make Dante blind with rage. He wanted Dante to charge. He wanted Dante to make a mistake. Maya squeezed her eyes shut, tears leaking out. It was her worst nightmare. Her shame broadcasted to the man she loved. But Dante did not charge. He stopped. He listened. He heard the catch in Ryland's breath. He heard the scuff of a shoe on grit. Dante signaled to Maya with a sharp hand gesture. "Stay down." Then he moved. He didn't go toward the voice. He climbed. He hauled himself up the side of a crate, ignoring the tearing pain in his side, moving with the silent lethality of a panther. Ryland was waiting around the corner, gun raised at chest height, grinning as he waited for Dante to run into his line of fire. Dante dropped from above. He landed behind Ryland, his boots hitting the concrete with a heavy thud. Ryland spun around, eyes wide with shock, but he was too slow. Dante knocked the gun from Ryland's hand with a brutal chop of his forearm. The pistol skittered across the floor. Sliding under a forklift, Ryland swung a desperate, clumsy fist. Dante caught it. He didn't just block it. He caught it, twisting the wrist until Ryland shrieked. Dante drove a knee into Ryland's stomach, doubling him over, then slammed an elbow into the back of his neck. Ryland crumbled to the floor. Dante stood over him, chest heaving. The rage he had suppressed for months, the fury of seeing Maya tied to that chair, the sound of Ryland's taunts, it all boiled over. He kicked Ryland onto his back. Ryland wheezed, blood bubbling on his lips, staring up with terror. Dante drew his gun. He aimed it directly at Ryland's forehead. His finger tightened on the trigger. The metal was cool against his skin. It would be so easy. One pull, and the monster was gone. One pull, and the voice was silenced forever. "Do it!" Ryland choked out, a bloody grin twisting his face. "Be the bad guy. Moretti. Show her what you really are." Dante's jaw clenched. The pressure on the trigger increased. "Dante!" The voice cut through the red haze. Maya ran from behind the pillar. She didn't run away. She ran to him. She stepped into the kill zone, ignoring Rylan, and laid a trembling hand on Dante's arm. "Dante, stop," she begged, her voice cracking. Dante didn't look at her. His eyes were locked on Rylan. "He deserves it. Maya, he needs to die." "Not like this," Maya said, gripping his forearm with both hands. "Not for me. Do not become a monster for me." "He hurt you," Dante growled. "I know." She wept. "I know what he did. But if you kill him now, he wins. He turns you into exactly what he is, a killer with no conscience. I do not want that. I do not want your soul to be the price of my justice." She stepped closer, placing her body between Dante's gun and Ryland's head, forcing Dante to look at her. "I want to see him in a cage. Dante," she whispered, tears streaming down her soot-stained face. "I want to stand in a courtroom and point at him and watch him go to prison for the rest of his life. I want him to rot. I want the other girls to be safe. If you kill him, the network stays hidden. If he lives, we can burn it all down. Please." Dante looked down at her. He saw the fear in her eyes, but it wasn't fear of him. It was fear for him. She was fighting for his humanity. He looked at Rylan, who was watching them with a mixture of confusion and hate. Dante let out a long, shuddering breath. The tension left his shoulders. He slowly lowered the gun from Rylan's head. "You are right," Dante murmured. "He's not worth it." Rylan let out a laugh of relief, struggling to sit up. "I knew you did not have the guts." Dante shifted his aim and fired. The shot was deafening. Rylan screamed, clutching his good leg. Dante had put a bullet clean through his thigh, avoiding the artery, but shattering the bone. It was a precise, calculated, crippling shot. "He's not going anywhere," Dante said coldly. He holstered his weapon and pulled out his phone. The sirens were loud now, screeching into the shipyard complex. He dialed Detective Miller. "Miller," Dante said, his voice flat. "Warehouse? B? You have your man. He's bleeding, so bring an ambulance. And Miller, the drive I gave you. That is just the beginning. Rylan is going to talk. Make sure he talks." He hung up and dropped the phone onto Rylan's chest. "Come on," Dante said to Maya. He didn't wait for the police. His men were already vanishing into the night, slipping away through pre-planned escape routes. Dante took Maya's hand, pulling her toward the shadows at the back of the warehouse where Marco had a car waiting. Before they stepped out into the cold air, Dante stopped in a dark corner, shielded from the flashing blue lights reflecting off the warehouse walls. He leaned back against the corrugated metal, wincing as the adrenaline faded and the pain in his side flared hot and bright. "You are hurt," Maya said, her hands hovering over the dark stain on his shirt. "We need to get you to a doctor." "I am fine," Dante said. "It is just a scratch." He reached out, cupping her face in his grime-stained hands. He looked at her as if he was memorizing her features. "Listen to me," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "The police are going to ask questions. I am going to have to make a deal. There might be charges. I might have to go away for a while. Or I might have to step down." "I don't care," Maya interrupted, shaking her head. "I do," Dante said intensely. "I promise to protect you. I am not going to abandon you. Maya, no matter what happens next, prison, court, hiding, I am yours. Do you understand? I am not leaving you." Maya looked at him. She saw the blood on his shirt, the soot on his face, the fierce, unyielding love in his eyes. She didn't see a mafia boss. She saw the man who had walked through fire for her. "I know," she whispered. "I know." She reached up, gripping his shoulders, and pulled him down to her. When their lips met, it wasn't tentative like the first time. It wasn't gentle. It was desperate. It was a collision of relief and survival. Maya wrapped her arms around his waist, careful of his wound but needing to feel him solid against her. She melted into him, her body aligning with his, the world narrowing down to the heat of his embrace and the taste of him. Dante kissed her back with a hunger that shook them both, his hand tangling in her hair, holding her close, in the darkness of the shipyard, with the police shouting orders outside and the ruins of her past behind them. They found a moment of absolute, unshakable peace. 6 months later. The hallway of the Havenport Superior Court was crowded with reporters, lawyers, and families. The air smelled of floor wax and old paper. The heavy double doors of Courtroom 4 opened, and Maya Collins stepped out. She looked different. She was wearing a tailored navy blazer and dark jeans. Her hair was cut shorter, framing her face. But the biggest difference was in her posture. She didn't walk with her head down. She didn't flinch when a reporter's camera flashed. She walked with her chin up, her stride steady. She had just spent 3 hours on the stand. She had looked Rylan Kane in the eye. Rylan, who sat in a wheelchair in a prison jumpsuit, and she had told the jury everything. She had named names. She had detailed the contracts, the coercion, the fear. She had watched the color drain from his face as his own defense attorney put his head in his hands. It was over. The jury would convict. Rylan was never going to hurt a woman again. The Black Serpents were being dismantled piece by piece by the FBI, fueled by the evidence Dante had provided. Maya pushed through the crowd, ignoring the questions shouted by journalists. She walked down the marble steps of the courthouse, stepping out into the bright spring sunshine. A man was waiting for her at the bottom of the stairs. He was leaning against a stone pillar, reading a newspaper. He wasn't wearing an Italian silk suit. He was wearing a simple brown leather jacket over a white t-shirt and dark denim. He looked younger, less severe. Dante Moretti folded the newspaper as she approached. The plea deal had been harsh but fair. In exchange for the trafficking ring and the serpents, Dante had pleaded guilty to lesser charges of racketeering. He had paid massive fines, surrendered assets, and agreed to a strict probation that effectively removed him from the criminal board. He was no longer the king of Havenport. He was just a man with a very good lawyer and a lot of enemies in prison. "How did it go?" Dante asked. Straightening up, Maya stopped in front of him. She took a deep breath, tasting the clean air. "It is done," she said. "He is going away." Dante nodded slowly. Good. He didn't ask for details. He didn't need them. He reached out and took her hand. His grip was just as warm and solid as it had been that first night in the club. "Ready to go home?" he asked. Maya looked at him, a smile breaking across her face. "Yes." They walked down the sidewalk, hand in hand, blending into the flow of the city. They didn't look like a tragedy anymore. They looked like any other couple. "So," Dante said, swinging their joined hands slightly, "Marco tells me the design for that indie rock band got approved." "It did," Maya said, her eyes lighting up. "They love the charcoal sketch. They want me to do the tour posters, too." "That is incredible," Dante said, looking at her with genuine pride. "I told you." "You have the eye." "And you?" Maya asked. "How is the logistics company?" Dante groaned, a theatrical sound. "Boring, incredibly boring. Do you know how much paperwork is involved in shipping organic avocados? It is a nightmare. I almost miss the racketeering." Maya laughed, bumping her shoulder against his. "You love it. You love that nobody is shooting at you." "I love that nobody is shooting at us," Dante corrected softly. They reached a crosswalk and stopped, waiting for the light to change. The city bustled around them, horns honking, people shouting, the rhythm of life moving forward. Dante turned to her. He ignored the people rushing past. He lifted his hand, brushing his thumb along the line of her jaw, a gesture that had become their silent language of affection. "I am proud of you, Maya," he said quietly. Maya looked up at him. She saw the man who had given up an empire to ensure she had a future. She saw the scars he carried, both the physical line on his ribs and the invisible ones on his conscience. "I love you," she said. Dante smiled. It was a real smile, reaching his eyes, free of shadows. "I love you," he answered. The light changed. He kissed her, a quick, firm press of his lips that promised forever, and they stepped off the curb together, walking toward the subway that would take them to a modest apartment in a quiet neighborhood where the only thing waiting for them was dinner and a peace they had chosen freely. The apartment was small, but it was theirs. That evening, the windows were open, letting in the cool breeze and the distant hum of traffic. The only light came from the city glow outside and a few candles flickering on the coffee table. Maya lay on the sofa, her head resting on Dante's chest. His arm was wrapped securely around her, his hand resting idly on her hip. They weren't talking. They didn't need to. Maya listened to the steady beat of his heart. It was a sound that used to terrify her, the sound of a powerful man. Now, it was her lullaby. She looked out at the lights of Havenport, somewhere out there, in a cold cell. Ryland Kane was staring at a wall, somewhere out there. The modeling agency was boarded up, seized by the government. She shifted slightly, looking up at Dante. He was watching the lights, too, his expression contemplative. "What are you thinking about?" she whispered. Dante looked down. He tightened his arm around her, pulling her just a fraction of an inch closer. "I was thinking," he murmured, his voice rumbling in his chest. "That for a long time. I thought power was about controlling fear, making people afraid so they couldn't hurt you." He kissed the top of her head, "But I was wrong. Power is this. It is being able to sit here, with you, and not be afraid of anything at all." Maya smiled, closing her eyes. She felt safe. Not because of locks or guards or guns, but because she was loved. Every man who had hurt her had paid, the debt was settled, and the life they were building now, this quiet, boring, beautiful life, was the receipt. She snuggled deeper into his embrace. "We are just getting started," she said softly. Dante smiled into the darkness. "Yes," he said, "we are. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I hope you enjoyed the journey of Maya and Dante as much as I enjoyed writing it for you. It is a story about resilience, justice, and the kind of love that heals even the deepest wounds. I would love to hear from you. Please leave a comment down below and let me know where you are listening from. It is always amazing to see how far these stories travel. And if you enjoyed this series, please make sure to subscribe to Mafia Romance Stories and share your thoughts in English in the comments. Your support means the world and helps us bring more of these stories to life. Until next time, stay safe and keep believing in happy endings.